Well, speaking of grazing and livestock, this week we've seen a rise in outdoor temperatures. Keeping your herd cool and comfortable during these hot summer months can be a significant challenge. One of the biggest components of keeping your cattle healthy, though, is maintaining access to fresh water. Market Journal's Mike Straub has this story.
Water quantity and quality is essential to cattle's health and performance. Hot weather and drought conditions can impact both quality and quantity for cattle. Water needs are influenced by several environmental factors: temperature, class of livestock, weight, and stage of production.
We know that water is extremely important to all mammals, and cattle fall into that category, of course. And as we think about getting hot in the summer, we know that animals, cattle, need more water. So once we start seeing these high temperatures, we really have to think about, do we have enough water to meet our cattle's requirements? And of course, the general rule of thumb that we always talk about is growing cattle and lactating cattle need at least 2 gallons of water per every 100 pounds of body weight when we hit this 90 degrees Fahrenheit temperature. So we have to keep that in mind. And the other thing we have to think about is that bigger cattle need more water, of course, and whatever stage of production they are in is going to affect the amount of water that they need. When we start getting these hotter days and we have higher humidity, that's always going to compound the fact that cattle need more water to help not only to meet their requirements, but it also helps them to cool off. So you need to make sure that if you have a windmill, for instance, has the wind been blowing? Do you have enough water? And if you think you're going to be stressed for water, how are you going to supplement that water? What are you going to do? The same as if you're in a feed yard, for instance, and it's getting hot. Do you have enough water to meet those requirements? Are your tanks big enough so cattle can get a drink? What are you going to do to alleviate some of that heat or water stress?
While ponds and dams are often the most questionable in quality, the water in tanks and troughs may also need to be tested. Nitrates, sulfates, and blue-green algae can affect water quality. Stagnant water, lakes, and ponds are ideal environments for growth of blue-green algae, which can be toxic to cattle.
So as we think about water quality, nitrates is a concern in some parts of the state. So if we know we have high nitrates in our water, we need to be thinking about that. We want our nitrates to be less than 100 parts per million for our cattle in our water. And keep in mind too that if we're feeding a feed or a forage that is high in nitrates, that's going to compound the issue as well. So the other thing we have to think about are sulfates in our water. Some parts of the state here in Nebraska have high sulfur in the water, and we want our sulfates to be less than 500 parts per million for growing cattle and less than 1,000 parts per million for mature cattle. Now, the final thing we have to think about on top of all of this is if we're feeding from or getting our water from a pond or from a dugout, we need to be concerned about blue-green algae. And of course, blue-green algae will grow better if there are nutrients in the water. And so we have to be concerned about that because we don't want that toxicity affecting our cattle as they're drinking water. Nitrate problems in cattle. So what nitrates do, they get converted to nitrates in the cow's rumen, and that will bind to hemoglobin. So they don't have as much oxygen in their blood as they need. And that will cause issues. And then for blue-green algae, if you're walking around, say the pond, for instance, and you notice there's dead frogs and snakes around there, that is going to tell you that that's probably toxic and you need to really be concerned about that. But some of the signs you'll see in cattle could be diarrhea, vomiting, lack of coordination, labored breathing, seizures, convulsions, and worst case scenario, of course, would be death on cattle.
There are several items that affect water quality. Producers should adopt management practices that do not negatively impact water quality. Monitoring water quality is a way to manage risk. Knowing if there is a problem before symptoms show up in the cow herd is the best way to prevent losses to cattle performance or death. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Mike Straub.